Of course, we're talking about the Japanese markets. They rallied during the first few months of Prime Minister Suga's premiership, but then they've been range-bound given all of the latest challenges in Japan. How vulnerable are Japanese stocks to political risk, especially as we head to the general election?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, look, it's not a huge part of how we sort of look at our investment case. I think politics, comes and goes, and so does its impact. But, we come back to sort of looking at where the valuations sit, and we think that, the Japanese market, is offering reasonable value. We have a number of companies that have, a very, very strong IP backing, and we are actually seeing earnings revisions starting to pick up for the first time in some in a number of months, and as a result of that, we think it is quite attractive. I think clearly political change always introduces uncertainty, and I think the fact that we've seen the market react reasonably positively, at least in the short term, shows you that that sort of underlying and that positive fundamentals are sitting within the Japanese economy.
Joshua, when it comes to the broader Asian markets, how much are we going to see continued upside if we, from the likes of the RBA, for example, see a delay to the taper plans, given that there are these data points that suggest that we're seeing a peak in the recovery story?
Yeah, I think the sort of whole debate around what's going to happen on interest rates is going to continue to go on for some time. We think the focus is probably a little bit too much on that. The question is if we are seeing a peaking in the economy, then clearly people are going to have to adjust how that's going to impact the markets going forward. From a perspective of Asia, Asia obviously has lagged the US markets quite significantly. The valuation support is quite positive. We think for a number of select markets where we haven't seen them necessarily, race ahead, for example, places like ASEAN, where they have still been hit by COVID, still have a potential lot of upside if we can see, the COVID cases start to come under control, reopening happen in those economies, and that sort of rebound start to occur. So I think it's about being a little bit more selective where you are looking for that opportunity.
Is the chip story, the semis story, particularly in Japan, still one that has further upside?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess for us, obviously, there's a lot of debate around, what's happening on double booking, where there are shortages, and again, we've seen commentary from some of the CEOs, for example, of the, auto companies saying that they still are seeing shortages. What we think is interesting is if we look at maybe some of the players that, I guess have been overlooked because they have not been the headline winners. And again, in markets like Japan, we think there are a number of sort of maybe second-tier players that are starting to, see their businesses pick up quite dramatically because of this, this demand that's starting to pick up. So we do think there are opportunities, but clearly for a number of the sort of like, headline-leading companies, we are getting a lot later in that cycle.
Joshua, where do you stand on Chinese equities, given that we continue to hear more news about scrutiny in all different sectors of the Chinese economy? Didi could be coming under state control very soon. What happens to those stock levels there?
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing is we're obviously seeing a lot of change occur in these markets, and the leadership has changed. That's been very clear. I guess from we look at like a number of the value names in some of these markets, and this has actually thrown up quite a few opportunities. Clearly the focus for a number of years has just been on the high-flying internet names, and we think we are starting to see that open up in these markets. We've seen a number of, particularly the renewable utility companies, quite a decent turn. Again, a number of the commodity companies, the turn that's starting to happen there. And these guys have been having, like an improvement in earnings for some time, but that has been overshadowed by people looking at other parts of the market. So it does introduce, a level of change, but we think that is creating some opportunity, particularly for stock pickers.